On the proposed designation of Blue Heron Park as a green reuse area pursuant to Florida's Brownfield Redevelopment Act. First, I'd like to thank Council members Lord and Ramirez for joining us virtually this evening, as well as members of town staff, including Etienne Bejarano from Parks and Rec Department, Mauricio Molino, town clerk, Ralph Casals, the town manager, and Rod Gibson, the communications manager for the town. So this meeting this evening was advertised through notices published in the Miami Herald's local section, as well as 3 signs posted at the Blue Heron Park property, an outreach through the town's July edition of the e-newsletter, the Cutler Bay Community Newspaper's center pages for the week of August 18th, the town's website calendar, and on the town hall bulletin board out front. All right, so we'll get started with the presentation. Thank you. All right, I guess, so yeah, so this meeting was public noticed in the Miami Herald through signs posted at the property and through several online and print outlets in the town. So today at this meeting, we'll just go over a bit of the history of the property that has now become Blue Heron Park, the historical uses, as well as the current conditions at the site and the property reuse plans. Then we'll go over the designation process, or the process for creating a brownfield area in Florida, specifically for the town of Cutler Bay. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So our property is located at 21900 Southwest 97th Avenue. It's a single parcel linear park. The park has been closed since June 27, 2024, since some new environmental conditions were discovered, which we'll touch on in just a moment. And is located within the Lakes by the Bay community.
The park itself is approximately 5 acres and currently has 9 outdoor fitness stations and 2 pavilions. So we're here today just to discuss Florida's Brownfields redevelopment program and how it can help the town address the environmental conditions of the project. But there are 2 key definitions to keep in mind here. These were recently amended by the Florida legislature, but the first is what a brownfield is. So a brownfield means any real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by actual or perceived environmental contamination and which has not yet been entered into a brownfield site rehabilitation agreement. The second key definition is a brownfield area. And this is a contiguous area of 1 or more brownfields, some of which may not be contaminated and which has been designated by a local government by resolution. So the process that the town will go through here to create the brownfield area will activate access to certain incentives provided by the state that come at no cost to the town. So looking at our historical use of the property that led to our environmental conditions here, historically going back to at least 1940, the entire region was primarily agricultural, which of course required the use of agricultural chemicals, including pesticides and herbicides applied over large areas of land for a long time. Gradually, the land uses in the area shifted to more residential or commercial uses that we're seeing here today. These environmental issues at Blue Heron Park were first discovered following what's called a background study for the town's new legacy park and municipal complex in the Civic and Resiliency Enhancement Zone. That background study was conducted in order to identify or establish a baseline of contaminants from the historical uses in the region. The primary contaminant that we see most often in South Florida is arsenic. And that background study was intended to identify if there is a baseline level of arsenic, because arsenic occurs naturally as a result of naturally occurring geological conditions in South Florida, but it's also historically a component of pesticides and herbicides that would have been applied to the agricultural uses in the region over time. It is a metal, so it does not go away very easily on its own. So if it's applied to an agricultural site back in 1945, it's likely going to remain in that area unless it's washed away by stormwater or the soil is physically moved. And that's likely what we are seeing here today, because this land was originally agricultural land turned over into a park that was eventually gifted to the town by the local development authority associated with the Lakes by the Bay development. Now, as a result of that background study finding here at the Blue Heron Park site, the town conducted a more thorough investigation to assess the horizontal and vertical extent of that arsenic contamination in the soil. The town also installed a groundwater monitoring well to assess for the potential presence of any contaminated groundwater associated with these historical agricultural uses. Fortunately, no groundwater impacts have been identified, but the soil impacts were identified across much of the park area, with contaminants ranging in levels from just below the criteria for residential use to just above the criteria for commercial use at the site. So as a result, the town fully delineated the horizontal and vertical extent of those soil impacts with arsenic. No additional contaminants have been identified. So our next step is to conduct site rehabilitation in coordination with Miami-Dade County DERM. So most recently, the town has submitted a soil management plan and source removal plan to Miami-Dade County DERM for approval. DERM issued its conditional approval of the plan to excavate the impacted soil wherever the town can find it on the Blue Heron Park property down to a maximum depth of the water table or the limestone, whichever we reach first. So this excavation will vary in depth between 1 to 6 feet, depending on the location and the concentration of the contaminants in those areas. After the impacted soil is excavated and disposed off-site, clean soil will be imported to fill the backfilled areas back to the original grade. There are quite a few trees at the site, 296 trees at our last count. Those trees will be protected throughout the excavation process by establishing a buffer around the trees. In order to avoid damaging the tree's root system, some soil will remain around the root system, but a high visibility liner or a layer will be placed above the roots, and then clean soil placed on top of that to prevent anybody from accessing the impacted soil that has to remain around the trees to protect their own health. Following the excavation of all the impacted soil and placement of clean fill, groundwater will be monitored for at least 4 quarters to establish there are no new groundwater impacts that weren't previously identified or no neighboring plume was disturbed during the construction activities. And also mentioning during the construction activities, a dust control plan will be followed. So silt fencing will be placed around the park. The soil stockpiles will be wet to prevent dust from being mobilized, and dust monitoring stations will be placed strategically around the park to detect the levels of dust in the air. If levels of dust reach a certain threshold, work will stop until the dust levels can settle down once again. Now, looking to the future, so the Blue Heron Park will be renovated through an enhanced master plan following the completion of site rehabilitation. So plenty of brand new soil at the site. We'll need to place something on top of it and around those beautiful trees. So the improvements to the existing park space will include reinstallation of the 9 outdoor fitness stations, a renovated rubber trail and walking path around the lake, as well as 2 new picnic pavilions to replace the existing ones. We expect the work to start no later than October of 2025, and the town is currently finalizing bid documents and plans to obtain competitive sealed beds from contractors. And we expect the park to reopen by late 2025 or early 2026. Now back to Florida's Brownfields redevelopment program and how this program can help the town overcome the barrier that is caused by owning a site with contamination the town itself did not cause. So the Florida Brownfields Redevelopment Program was established in 1997 as a tool for local governments and private developers to work together or address their own sites to clean up contamination caused by somebody else in the past for their own redevelopment sites. The primary way the program overcomes these barriers is through an economic incentive called the Voluntary Cleanup Tax Credit Program. The town is no stranger to the Voluntary Cleanup Tax Credit Program. At the town's own care site, or the new Legacy Park and Municipal Complex site adjacent to the Publix, the town and Publix have both worked together to clean up their own portions of this property. To date, the town has received just over $260,000 in voluntary cleanup tax credits in exchange for cleaning up its portion of the care site. Publix has also received a significant amount. So this is a great program and a great way to help significantly reduce the cost of cleanup. So this voluntary cleanup tax credit is equal to 50% of the town's cleanup costs incurred each year. And there are additional bonus tax credits available when the town completes cleanup. And these are Florida corporate income tax credits issued by the state. They come at no cost to the town, no cost to the county. The town is then able to sell these corporate income tax credits to other entities and use the cash to fund town projects and reinvest them back into park projects like this. So statewide, this program is a winner in the town of Cutler Bay, but as well as Miami-Dade County and across the state. We have over 600 of these designated brownfield areas statewide. They range in size from less than an acre to over 10,000 acres, and they've generated billions of dollars in capital investment and created over tens of thousands of new jobs. So the process can apply to both private property and publicly owned property. For property owned by the local government, there's a special section of the statute that applies. The process does remain the same though. The town is required to provide notice, conduct 2 public hearings to consider a resolution that would then create the designated brownfield area. We're also holding this community meeting, although it's not necessarily required for a local government-owned property. It is required for private property designations. So we figured it'd be best to present the designation to the public in advance of our 2 public hearings. At those 2 public hearings, the town council would be asked to consider 4 factors for designation. The town council is not required to reach any decision or any particular finding as to any one of those factors, but the town council is required to consider them at that hearing. So the first of those factors is whether the brownfield area warrants economic development and has a reasonable potential for such activities. So in this case, we don't expect the park to warrant economic development. It's been a park for quite a long time. It's going to continue to remain a park. So this factor doesn't necessarily apply, but we do see parks as major economic impact generators for the town. We have a nice area to attract new residents and new businesses. The second is whether the proposed area to be designated represents a reasonably focused approach and is not overly large in geographic coverage. Going back a slide or two, you can see the very, very large, that blue area is a designated brownfield area created by Miami-Dade County back in the late 90s or early 2000s. So it's a very large area intended to encompass as much former agricultural land as possible. Here, we're talking about a very small area, the land specific to the park use. So this is a very focused approach and is definitely not overly large in geographic coverage. The third is whether the area has the potential to interest the private sector in participating in rehabilitation. And that is already the case here. The town has engaged the private sector to assist with the cleanup activities and will continue to engage the private sector to assist with the renovation of the park. And finally, the final factor for consideration is whether the area contains sites or parts of sites suitable for limited recreational open space, cultural, or historical preservation purposes. And that's certainly the case here. The park will remain a park, so we'd have more than just limited recreational open space. This land will be dedicated to recreational open space going forward following the park renovations and reopening of the park later this year or early next year. And just looking at our timeline, so today is our community meeting. Coming up next, we'll have our first public hearing at the town council meeting following the budget discussion on September 11th, starting at 6 p.m. We'll have our second public hearing on September 25th at the town council meeting, also starting at 6 p.m. And then finally, the town, if the resolution is approved, if the town council creates this new brownfield area, the town will be eligible to enter into a brownfield site rehabilitation agreement with Miami-Dade County. And it's this agreement, which is a voluntary cleanup agreement, that activates the incentives that will be available for the town to help cover a significant portion of the cost to do the cleanup here. So that deadline is December 31st, 2025. And if the town can enter into that agreement by then, the town will be able to access these voluntary cleanup tax credits for all of the work that it has already done this year and going into next year until the project is complete. All right, with that, I'll turn to the audience for any questions. All right, hearing none. Are there any questions in the Zoom room?
We have Councilmember Susie Lord has a question.
Great.
Pull it up right now. Councilmember Lord.
Hi, how are you? Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. It's really informative. And I apologize for not being there in person. My day job didn't allow it today. But you did touch on the tax credits, and you did so very well. I wanted to mention, while I know the VC TC program well, because I learned about it on one of our trips in Tallahassee, I don't think our residents understand it the way that we do as a council. So I'm hoping that you can touch a little bit more on the program and discuss in greater detail the percentage of the maximum dollar amount of reimbursements Cutler Bay should be entitled to through the VCTC program, in order for our residents to have a better understanding of the monies that Cutler Bay should be receiving.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councilmember Lord.
Of course.
So, the VCCC program, for short, we call it the VCTIC program as well, or the Voluntary Cleanup Tax Credit Program, because we do love acronyms in environmental law. As I mentioned, under the program, the town is eligible to receive a Florida corporate income tax credit equal to 50% of its cleanup costs incurred each year, but there are some limits to that. So the town can incur up to $1 million in costs per year. So that means a maximum $500,000 tax credit that the town can receive back for all of its costs incurred in a calendar year. So that calendar year will go from January 1st to December 31st of 2025. So even if the town enters into that brownfield site rehabilitation agreement, say in September, October, or November of 2025, the town will be eligible to receive a tax credit for its costs starting January 1st of 2025. So it looks back in time. So if the town, say, spends $1 million in 2025, it's eligible for a $500,000 tax credit in 2025. If the town spends $500,000 in 2026, the town is eligible for a $250,000 tax credit for its costs incurred in 2026. In the future, the town will also be eligible for what's called a site rehabilitation completion order bonus tax credit. And this is a tax credit that rewards you for finishing the job that you agreed to start. So that bonus tax credit, we call it the SRCO bonus tax credit, will be equal to 25% of all of the town's cleanup costs incurred from project start to project finish, with a cap of $2 million total. So to make the math easy, if the town spent $2 million total from project start to project finish, the town will receive a $500,000 tax credit when that SRCO issues, plus that initial $500,000 tax credit that the town received in its first year doing work. And then if the town spent $1 million in that second year as well, they would receive that second $500,000 tax credit. So we're looking at a total return on a $2 million spend of about $150,000, not $150,000, I'm sorry, based on a $2 million spend, $1.5 million in Florida corporate income tax credits that the town can then sell to an entity that does pay Florida corporate income tax. So we're looking at a 75% return in the form of a tax credit, and those tax credits usually sell at a rate of about 90 cents on the dollar. So overall, after those tax credits are sold, we could see a recovery back to the town of about 67.5% of the town's initial spend on the cleanup.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Do we have any more questions in Zoom?
Currently, no questions on Zoom.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Molino, I'm sorry. All right. Well, thank you all for joining this community meeting today. This meeting has been recorded, and the town will publish the recording on these social media platforms no later than tomorrow. If you do have any other questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to the town staff, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible.